Hey, good morning, Eastern Oregon, and welcome to this April 17th version of AM Live on EOA, your connection to Eastern Oregon. And you can find all of our content at a link tree that's at EOA.tv, EOA.tv. That takes you to where all of the locations of our YouTube, our Facebook, our Instagram, all of those places, and also our Roku channel, our website, and also the podcast networks that this episode ends up on later. So here in just a little bit, we are going to have OTEC CEO Les Penning is going to be with us. He's here in the studio, and we're looking forward to that conversation.
EOA.tv is our name, but that's not the address where the link tree is. It's EOA.
Oh, you're right.
Network.
You're right.
Easy to mix up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
EOA. Yeah.
Just so people don't go
EOA.tv takes you to the website.
to the website. Yeah.
EOA.network takes you to that.
Easy
link
to
tree.
get mixed up though. I mean, they're.
I know. Who
kinda
made
go-
up all these names anyhow?
I don't know. Some dude.
How are you?
I'm good. What is today? It's First Friday.
It's the Thursday. That's
Yeah.
what most people call it.
It's Thursday. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't want to think about that. There's another day. But like we've always talked about, like these days they don't even matter. Like it just all runs together anyways.
Yeah, well, especially right now for you because you
Yeah,
got
'cause
all those.
Sports.
Yeah.
I love the spring though. It's my favorite probably.
Are you doing anything special for this weekend? It's Easter.
There's no.
No, you're not doing a family Easter dinner.
Maybe. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant special to me is like going to the baseball. That's the highlight of my day. There is some games this weekend, but I don't know. It's EOU's last homestand, and I'll talk about that during the sports report for baseball. But Easter's never been like a really big family holiday
Yeah.
for my family. Like, I don't know. My sister's more into it than anybody,
Right.
obviously, but mom and dad and like never really. I mean, yeah, we got an Easter basket probably when we were a kid, but we've never really been like the family that does like the big dinner and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah, my ex-wife's family did, and so then there was stuff to do. But like my family, I doubt they'll even. I mean, I doubt they'll even cut.
Yeah, we're going over tomorrow. We're going over to see Michaela in
In Portland.
Vancouver area.
Yeah, Vancouver. Sweet.
Yeah.
Staying the whole weekend.
Ridgefield. Yeah, it'll be super cool because we've never, she's got, her and Chris have, I want to say a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so they're just right at that age where we could do an Easter egg hunt.
Is the
we're gonna-
baby really 3? It's got to be older than 3 because she was pregnant when I first started here.
Was she?
I think.
Well, she's got, maybe she's close to 4, Lily.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
I tell you,
thought-
and she's like, she is a clap girl. She's a handful. Just I don't know how else to put it, man. Yeah.
I think all girls are like that. I
Yeah.
got two of them myself, and they're
Yeah.
definitely boo. Man.
Yeah. So I'm
Different
really,
breed.
Tanya and I are really looking forward to that, though. It'll
Good.
be super fun.
That'll
Yeah.
be fun. Good
Yeah.
reset and go see the family for
Yeah,
the weekend.
yeah.
It's awesome.
All right. You want to do sports?
Let's do it.
All right.
AM Sports Report brought to you by Northwest Furniture and Mattress. They're having a floor model closeout on select Sealy mattresses where you could save up to 50% on mattresses. It's also their anniversary sale. 10% off everything in the store, and then have your invoice put into a drawing to have it paid completely. Northwest Furniture and Mattress, Big Red Rocking Chair, on Elm, off Adams in LeGrand. There's not a lot to talk about today. It's a Thursday. It is a busy time of year, but we're going to look at some schedules real quick and talk a little bit about EOU track. EOU baseball hosts UBC this weekend for their final homestand of the year. Doubleheaders tomorrow and Saturday, starting at noon, right down here at Optimist in LeGrand. It should be interesting. This EOU baseball team, I've said it time and time again, is better than they have been since baseball's been brought back at EOU. Solid coaching. The recruiting's been really good, and they just look good. Justin Ash of EOU Track and Field went to the Brian Clay International last night at Azusa Pacific. He ran the 10,000 meter at 11:20 at night. This is weird. I got a text this morning from Ben, the coach up at EOU. So he runs the 10,000 meters at 11:20 at night. He was the only non-D1 or D2 runner in the race. He broke the EOU school record last night, the one that stood since 1981 and was held by Hall of Famer Don Stearns. He ran a 29:20, which 10,000 meters. That's a really good time. But the crazy thing is, and this tells you how good the athletes are nowadays, he was 12th in his heat, and there were 4 heats.
Wow.
And he broke the EOU school record that had lasted for 45 years.
At 11 o'clock at night?
At 11 o'clock at night. It's pretty cool. EOU Track and Field has the multi-championships this weekend, actually starting today and tomorrow in Klamath Falls. EOU softball heads to Bushnell for a 4-game series that is probably, arguably the most important series of the year. They need to win all 3 of the conference games to put themselves in position to win the CCC on the final weekend of the year right here in LeGrand against the number 1 team in the country, who they can beat. They beat Tech, who's number 2 out of 3, and then Tech beat Southern 2 out of 3. So EOU and Southern is probably, it's either this weekend or the following weekend that's the most important for the Mounties. I would love to see them win the regular season title after being picked 4th in the conference. And I said at the beginning of the year, I guarantee you they don't finish 4th. They lost their number 1 pitcher from last year, who's an All-American in Kaylee Hoskins, but they had their number 2 won 20 games last year. And in the college ranks, 20 games in a season is pretty good. And they kind of overlooked her, and we saw what happens this last weekend when you don't have your number 1, as EOU lost 2 out of 4 to Carroll. And they've only lost 3 conference games all year, one of them being to Tech. So, not having your number 1 really hurts. So hopefully Kylie Parsons is healthy and back this weekend with Bushnell, and then the following weekend with Southern. EOU is currently ranked number 13 in the country. I think is about right. Although they beat number 2, they have a really good record. I like being underrated, going into, especially like in this conference where you have the number 1 team, the number 2 team, the number 24 team, and the number 13 team all in the same conference. LHS baseball goes to Ontario tomorrow for a 3 p.m. Mountain Time doubleheader with the Tigers, while the undefeated number 2 in the state, according to the coaches, Lady Tiger softball team will host Ontario at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. LHS senior all-GOL volleyball player Aubrey Basinius signed her letter of intent to continue her athletic and academic career at Columbia Basin College last night. We were there. Take a look.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We're here celebrating Aubrey Basinius, who will be continuing with her volleyball and academic journey at Columbia Basin College, where she will compete as part of the CBC volleyball team and pursue a degree in agriculture business. Volleyball didn't always come easy for Aubrey. As a coach's kid, she spent many seasons learning the game from the bench as a manager when she was younger, and it wasn't always an easy road having your mom as your coach. But her dedication, resilience, and love for the sport made all the difference for Aubrey. Through her hard work and determination, Aubrey grew into a standout player whose performance speaks for itself. She is a team player who every coach wants on their team. Aubrey's accolades include GOL First Team All-League for her junior and senior year, All-State Honorable Mention team for her senior year, 1A through 6A Volleyball Oregon National Guard and OSAA Most Valuable Teammate Award, Varsity Team Captain for the Tigers for her junior and senior year, OSAA Scholar Athlete all 4 years of participating, and the GOL Scholar Athlete for all 4 years. Before she heads off to CBC, Aubrey will represent LeGrand one more time, taking the court in the All-Star Game this June at Eastern Oregon University. We can't wait to cheer her on. Aubrey's talents extend well beyond the volleyball court. She will graduate with an honors diploma from LHS and several college credits. She is a strong leader in 4-H, FFA, track, club volleyball, and choir, as well as being involved in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and National Honor Society. She has generously given her time through countless community service hours like the Tigers Volleyball Peak Game fundraiser and her 4-H Junior Leadership Project at the Union County Fairgrounds. Her love for the LeGrand community is clear in everything that she does. We are incredibly proud of the amazing young woman Aubrey has become. Her passion, character, and drive has has paved the way for this exciting new chapter for her. You make our family and community so proud. Thank you, Aubrey, for your dedication to LHS volleyball. Columbia Basin is lucky to have you. You're in good hands with Coach Taylor and the Hawks volleyball program.
AM Sports Report brought to you by Northwest Furniture and Mattress. Go check out their anniversary sale. Have a chance to get your invoice paid today. Big red rocking chair on Elm off Adams in LeGrand.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, man.
Yep.
All right, well, let's take a look outside. It's pretty and crisp.
Yeah, it's cold out there.
Yeah.
I don't know why they got to mess with us with the weather. Like
They?
Yeah, well, him and his associates.
Yeah. Who knows? I wonder if there's betting on everything. I wonder if there's like a betting scheme on the weather these
I
days.
guarantee you people
Yeah.
bet on it. Yeah, I'll bet you there is.
That's some desperation right there.
They bet on like the color of the Gatorade in the Super Bowl.
Really?
Yeah, like.
Oh, like what's going to get dumped on the winning coach? Yeah.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's look at that weather graphic, Benny. So only 56 this morning today.
crazy.
Yeah. And it looks like it's going to be warming up a little bit as we get into the weekend. So not much moisture, which is good.
That's the important part.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to have rain over in Vancouver area.
Imagine that.
I know, yeah.
That's where I moved back here from. Get
Yeah.
out of that. You
Get
wet
out
every
of
day.
that constant drizzle.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing that Michaela comments on quite a bit is like the overcast and
It's miserable.
yeah. They essentially kind of live in they live up kind of east, kind of up in the mountains, up in the hills, from Vancouver, and it's like it's a rainforest up there essentially.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So,
I'm sure.
all righty. Okay. Well, hey, I'm glad you guys are here with us today. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have Les Penning, CEO of OTEC. He'll be with us. We'll be right back. All right, we are back with Les Penning, CEO of OTEC. How are you, man?
I'm good, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. We've connected a number of times, and I think the last time I saw you, you were at Hoffman's out at. You and your
That's right.
daughter were on your way to Wallowa County or something.
We were.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to catch up for sure.
Yeah, and I took an opportunity there to pitch this to you. Hey, I really would like to have you come on the show sometime. So yeah.
No, we appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So, Les, how long have you been here at OTEC? Start there.
So been here about 8 years.
Okay.
Actually came in right in the heels 2016 December.
Okay.
Started in there, and so really 2017 to current date.
Yeah. And kind of give me a thumbnail version of your life, where you were raised at, and then kind of how you got what's your journey been like to get here?
Sure. No. Well, came out of so I was born in South Dakota, in the Black Hills in South Dakota, and it's actually Belle Fourche, South Dakota is the center of the nation. So if you're thinking about
Oh, that's fun.
dressing out,
Yeah,
that's the basis of where I grew up. But it's that corner of South Dakota. You're setting right in. Where I grew up was about 20 miles from Montana, about 10 miles from Wyoming, in South Dakota in the Black Hills. So,
Oh, wow.
So basis-wise, that's where I grew up. So that kind of logistically give you a sense of the last utility I came from, Powder River Energy Corporation, which was a cooperative as well. We covered all of pretty big territory in northeast corner of Wyoming, touched into Montana a little bit and into South Dakota a little bit. But so I spent the last couple decades prior to coming here at that utility, and so then basically was recruited out to Oregon. I found it. This is such a beautiful area here in the valley, and very similar to the territory it came from. And
Yeah.
I understand you came out of Wyoming as well.
Yeah,
so
no,
you
and
know-
I had that same experience when I came to this area. It was like it just felt like home. I mean, culturally, the people, there's more moisture here than there is in Wyoming and South Dakota. But yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point, and a little bit high desert,
Right.
kind of as the mountains strip it off here, and so Black Hills kind of very similar in that
Yeah.
area. But the Bighorns, which
Yep.
were part of our service territory, so
Yeah.
I was in the Black Hills, but our service territory, the utility that served in, so that kind of took us from Sundance, Wyoming, if you're familiar with that kind of territory. That's right on the border, and up through Gillette, Wyoming, and the Powder River Basin area. That's where a lot of energy development was happening in that area. And then Sheridan, and you kind of hit the Bighorns, which really remind me of the Elkhorns.
Yeah,
in,
very
this
much so.
territory, to your
Yeah.
point, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's super. Yeah, and just a little sidebar. So it's kind of funny. And those were coal fire plants. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had a little of everything
Okay.
there. Wyoming, Montana, they're rich in energy in lots of ways,
Right.
and in mining. So you do have, that whole area. There's a lot of coal mining through there. To your point,
Yeah.
a lot of natural gas, a lot of oil,
Right.
uranium.
Right.
So you're getting into the nuclear side. If you're in our business, things
Yeah.
you pay attention to. But they actually have Wyoming has really good wind and surprisingly really good solar.
Yeah.
So they're energy rich in many ways. And so, but to your point, a lot of the power plants up in that area, because you're setting on coal, you're setting on gas.
Right.
So you see all that mix in generation up in that territory for sure.
Yeah. So I was born in was born in Thermopolis, Wyoming, actually, but
Okay,
ended
sure.
up in Casper. Yeah, and
Right.
spent most of my days growing up there. Well, and so when I was a older teen, my dad and I and my brother had a landscaping business. He was a county agent
Okay.
who got frustrated with the political side of that, and we started this business. But anyhow, during the winter though, we would sell coal, and so yeah, so the very first 18-wheeler I ever drove was without an appropriate license, and drove to Gillette to have it loaded with coal so that it could. Yeah, it was.
That's
yeah.
an interesting
Yeah, so
connection.
just yeah, so that, I don't know, just kind of interesting. So that, that's kind of, and I had never been to a coal mine until those journeys,
Sure.
and so then I would go like, holy smokes, this is it,
Yeah.
So, but anyhow,
It's amazing, isn't
Yeah.
it? But it is a good. I mean, with what's happening in the energy world, and kind of, at least when you're in our business,
Right.
right? I mean, everything's energy. If you're in sports, right, you pay attention to certain things. But that's the space we're in. But that area is a good barometer for a lot of the things happening. When there's pressure in the marketplace on carbon and what's happening that side. Coal's taken a pretty big hit, environmentally, of how they see that, kind of where the country sits and how people
Right.
feel about those areas, right? But to your point, where Wyoming's at, because of the different energy resources that they have, you're really seeing the ebb and flow of the marketplace and kind of how that affects those areas, because in that particular basin, where you were picking up coal from,
Yeah.
those mines were, producing at that time, about 400 million tons of coal, annually coming
Yeah.
just out of the basin area. That was, at that time, that was close to 40% of the U.S. coal fleet
Right,
of the nation,
yeah.
right, feeding that, which is about 30% of U.S. consumption at the time.
Right.
So you
Wow.
you had a pretty big, in what you're doing way back then, and then the transitional things that happened with that transition to natural gas, and coal bed methane was actually a gas component that was the next development phase, and so you started seeing gas production and coal coming down, gas production coming up is less intense on carbon, but still was a fossil fuel. And you started seeing wind pick up. So as I say, as a barometer, you can kind of see what was happening in uranium mining as it kind of pushes to the nuclear side. You kind
Right.
of get all those little
Right.
flavors in that region.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you, before we get you back to
Mm-hmm.
Eastern Oregon and talk more about OTEC, how did you get into the co-op business? I mean, you know, what your education and process? How did you end up in this area?
Yeah, it was, kind of give a little snippet of that piece. So I was, at a education-wise, I kind of was always working and going to school.
Right.
That's kind of the plan. But I had a industrial technology background at this from an education side initially. I picked up business education along the way. Went back to college along the way for my business degree. But how I ran into the cooperative side of the business was unique because I had a small telecommunications company doing two-way satellite work. You talked a little bit
Right,
off air about
interesting.
the news kind of program, what was going on when you first started
Right,
in on kind
yeah.
of what was happening with mobile vans and satellite communications. We did that kind of work, you know, businesses that were doing two-way satellite systems where they had to communicate. You know, so much of that has changed, but satellites play a major role still in
Absolutely.
today's environment, right? And then it was also the launch of digital satellite technology. So you've seen the C-band systems, the big, you know, multimeter, 4-meter dishes, you know, 6, 7, 8 feet, you know, those screen dishes, and then they are moving down to these small dishes like you've seen with DirecTV
Right.
or Dish Network, and at the time, Primestar Communications, that's TCI Cable, was in this transition. They launched the digital transition. So rural areas, this is where it kind of ties into the cooperative space. So rural areas, that was a big deal because suddenly you were moving to a transition of technology into low-cost satellite, which looked a lot like cable. So I
Right.
got into that business, and I was serving, serving a territory, and I kept running into this DirecTV area, and it was called NRTC, and I was trying to figure out who these guys were. Well, National Rural Telecommunications Cooperative.
Huh.
So they're a spinoff of NRECA. NRECA is our National Rural Cooperative Association, which you all as owners of OTEC are owners of all this infrastructure upstream, but they actually owned a piece of DirecTV. NRTC
Oh,
did.
interesting. Okay.
They owned part of the satellite. There was co-ops that bought territories that actually provided all the programming and services. And so the work that I was doing in that space and what the cooperative Powder River Energy, where I ultimately went to work for, I actually went to them initially because it was also the time of deregulation, when the markets were deregulating in the power industry. And so had just ideas and thoughts about what that would look like, because in a deregulated environment, you were having people provide, you know, if it was OTEC, we may own the powers and wires, but a cable company might have your power bills when they're aggregating bills. You know, you could see your phone and your cable and your
Right.
power bill. That's what the thought process was, some of those at the time. But more than anything, I just went to approach Powder River Energy to say, hey, you guys are in this business. I think this is what we do this really well. So maybe you should contract our company to do this type of work for you, right?
Yeah.
But in tandem with that, this NRTC thing and understanding that the co-ops actually owned portions of this infrastructure really intrigued me, along with this deregulated environment. And the relationship through that, ultimately, I wound up coming to work for the utility, and really, outside of coming in the door in that space, I come into them because they're trying to diversify their utility and get ready for a diversified market because of deregulation. Suddenly they'll be competing in other ways, right, as how that was seen in deregulation. And so, so I came to work for them. That was my entry point. That's how I got acquainted with them, through this side. And then when I came into that environment, deregulation waned off rather quickly. It didn't work out the way they thought it would across the country, and they backed up, and that was staved off. And long story short, once I was inside that utility working in these spaces, I just kind of grew up through taking over different sections of the cooperative and getting the opportunity to work in these different areas because of the expansive growth that utility was going through. So I kind of wound up covering different portions of the utility over the couple decades, and
Wow.
and then ultimately, like I say, when I was recruited out here, it was a pretty nice fit because of everything you mentioned. Similar, I think the people, the
Yeah.
culture, the terrain, the mountains, the areas are very, very similar and just beautiful areas. So that's, in a nutshell, as a
Yeah.
long diatribe to get back to how I got here, but that
Yeah.
was the ramp.
It
Yeah.
didn't have anything to do with going from one Powder River to another.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, there's only two of them.
is-
I just looked it
It's
up.
very interesting,
Yeah.
right? There's so many similarities when I come out here.
Yeah.
Baker's school colors the same as the high school I came from, and
Isn't that funny?
And there's just really unique ties, and a lot of that
Yeah.
probably from the Civil War, of a lot of the names and places and back in where I came
Yeah.
from, and
That is interesting.
it's good. That's a great tie. Yeah, it's a great tie.
Yeah, one thing that is way different is hunting here in Oregon versus hunting in, I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much more public land in those spaces, and it's
Very
just-
much so. Yeah,
It's way more complicated
yeah,
here.
yeah. It is. It
Anyhow,
is.
totally different topic.
But people enjoy it nonetheless.
Yes.
Actually, they're wired pretty similar, but yeah,
Yes.
whole different approach.
Yeah. So, in its most basic form, help us understand what's the difference between a privately owned company or a nonprofit
And the
and a
cooperative.
co-op. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at the energy, if you look at utilities, and you can kind of break them up into kind of somewhat a few categories. So if you look at investor-owned utilities, so they have investors that are not connected to necessarily their customers, and so you can have publicly traded investor-owned utility like PacifiCorp, Idacorp. That investor may be in Florida investing into a portfolio, and they spin off margins in their profits like any other for-profit company, and there's X percent of that flows to investors while they're providing rates, and they're still regulated under a public service commission, and every state has one. So that's in the investor-owned side. But when you come and look at the other bookend as a cooperative, owned by its members, controlled by its members. So as you all know, you vote for the directors that represent you. The directors hire this position, and I hire positions within the co-op. So you have a lot of influence and control, and I think that's a great thing, because that's the people. That's the people that you're serving. They know how it feels. They know what's going on. It's local impact, local control. And so that's the biggest dividing factor. And then we're not for profit. We're a 501c12 is how we're operating. So there's a 501c3. You hear a lot about charitable
Right.
nonprofits.
Okay.
We're a nonprofit, but we're a C12, a little different tax base, position of how that's formed. But the basis of that, I think, for the really clear point between those two areas, because in between there you have public utility districts and you have municipalities, and they're still controlled and operated by the people, but there's a little different thing. When your municipality owns something, you still are governing, right? Just like your city council, and what happens, you still have control and influence over that. It's just spread out a little different about how they actually manage that. And we're a cooperative, you're direct right inside. That is your utility. That's what they do. That's what you control. That's what you have influence on. And any margins that come off of that, so because it's not for profit, those go into your capital credits. And so outside of just where our rate structure sets, at any given time, your capital credits are based off that consumption. And then when we retire capital credits, that's giving back that bit that we're using to help operate the utility at a local level, and then we're paying that money back. So part of it is we borrow from banks, actually cooperative banks that you all own, and we borrow from the people through the process of the cooperative ownership. And so we're using those two instruments, in order to finance and do what we do. And so that's where your capital credits, they're banked, and then when the board determines the health of the cooperative is okay and they want to spin off, they want to give that money back, then they retire those capital credits. But they're always tracked. They don't go anywhere, but it depends on the health of the utility on how many capital credits they retire and over what cycle they do. But that's the big difference is you've got this additional margin built into investor-owned utilities that goes somewhere else outside
Right.
of our communities and leaves, where the local control and what happens there is inside, and all that spins up. And hats off to the founders of OTEC, 30, just a little over 30 years ago, when citizens got together and said, hey, we want to form a cooperative and buy out this investor-owned utility and bring that home, bring it local.
Interesting, yeah.
And it's a really big deal, and really great for the local economies, great for local control, and I think it's an amazing success story. Nothing from my end. I come in and have the opportunity to work with amazing communities and the board that hired me, but it's a gift. I think it's a gift to the communities.
Okay, so thank you. Really good explanation. And so then I'm going to ask the low-hanging questions, because those are the people that's like,
Absolutely.
okay, well, wait a minute. So if I own the business, or if I'm part of the owner, then how come I don't have control over whether my rates go up or not? So explain to me, I don't know, just take that question. and
No,
help me
no, that's
understand
good.
that. Yeah.
And the answer is you actually do.
Okay.
But like anything, if you're the sole owner,
Right.
you'll
right.
say this is what it is, and you will live and die with that reason, right?
Right.
Because you're the only owner, right?
Right.
Well, we have 22,000 owners,
Right.
serving just under 60,000 people in the area, but all the member owners directly, like each of you. So you have influence, and that's why the engagement's important, because you're in the election process for electing a board member, and our board members across our counties. So you have, here in Union County, and Baker County, Harney, and in Grant. So we have one director, and it's kind of by population density. So you have more directors here out of Union than they do in Baker, and they do in the other two, right? But you vote on all those directors, and so
Right.
that's where it starts. So
And that's our
so
representatives.
that's your representatives, and they're the voice. They're the voice of the people, because you elect them in to do that. And
Okay.
and I think there's really great access to those folks. I think they're really committed to what they do. But that is up to the folks, right?
Right.
To make those decisions. And then when it comes time for kind of what happens with our rates, is they're getting, we're working through what happens with power supply. We have this is some utility terms, but all requirements contract with Bonneville Power. So what that means is there's a contract there, and even though their bulk is hydro, they have about 10% nuclear in their portfolio, and then anything outside of that, they go into the market to purchase if we need power supply.
Okay.
So that contract means we look to Bonneville to provide all those services and to get that power to us. So inside that contract, then we're working with other associations on how well Bonneville manages that end of things, and what those costs are doing, and then what our costs are. And right now, about 50% of the costs in your power bill is power supply. The other 50% is everything it takes to operate the utility. So
Get it
just
to
to give
you.
you a
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
so that's a big chunk of it, right?
Right,
Of
of course,
paying
yeah.
attention to what happens on the power supply side. And so so that control point, when you're asking about how does that affect rates, there's certain things that we can do, and investments, and with that contract with Bonneville of, can we build our own power? Well, we can do a little bit of that under that contract. We can choose to, we're going through a process right now of new contracts with Bonneville, but we are, the size of utility matters if you're trying to talk about building generation and doing certain things, and the investment, because who's our investors?
Right.
That's all of our communities, right? But that's this big comparatively to what Bonneville is serving,
Right.
in the sense of loading. So, but bottom line is, when you come to influencing those costs, the board is paying attention at this level here, and they're hiring my position, which is operationally focused, and strategically focused. But the board is looking over everything that they know, because they're representing those communities. It's like,
Right.
what does that look like in the sense
Right.
of rates and rate structures? And if we go to increase rates, we're doing we have work product that we bring to them, and this is another industry term, but a cost of service study. We go through this cost of service study to understand how is those costs, through that study applied across our different rate classes. So you have a residential rate class, you have irrigation, you have industrial,
Yeah.
commercial classes, right? How are you spreading those rates? What's fair and equitable? How do they take services, right? What's the cost to manage those services? And so that process goes through all, that detailed process gets you into all those structural things. And at the end of the day, we're not for profit, so we're not trying to go, well, I think we want to make a little more than that, right? It's really about what does it cost to serve,
Right.
and then there's a margin on top of that just to make, because it's never going to be perfect,
Right.
We swing a lot in our supply just from residential when it's really cold and it's really warm, air conditioners on, heat's on, or if it's steady,
Yeah.
right? And we're trying to predict and manage those costs in association with the power supply that flows in. But that rate component is you really do have a lot of control through that, but it is an aggregated control.
Right. Well, yeah, and at the end of the day, it's you gotta keep operating.
Yeah.
So I mean, if costs are going up, it's not unlike my business here. If
100%.
if business goes down or it fluctuates, then we've got to cut corners. We've got to figure out, and so on the other side of that, then I've got to maybe raise rates on to our clients and so on and so forth. And so those are not fun decisions, but at the end of the day, you're looking at the bottom line. You're looking at what makes financial sense, right?
That's exactly it. And
Yeah.
and just like the rest of rest of the country, rest of the globe, but certainly here in the U.S. over the last 4 years, we've seen extreme increases. I mean, you got an inflation component that you're just seeing from one side, but you're seeing supply chain issues and all these other disruptions that were some after effects of COVID, that whole piece,
Yeah.
and then just policy in general that affects, depending whatever administration's in office,
Yeah.
they're coming at the world through different things, but energy policy matters, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, in our world, but just like everywhere else, costs have just skyrocketed in many places. And so we've seen, if you looked at just like some of our distribution transformer sites, when I say power transformers, like our substations, our big stations that you see, those are power transformers sitting there. But if you think about distribution transformers, what you might see on a pole or a pad mount outside your house in in those areas, those green boxes, when you see that, like, we've seen almost 200% increase in a 36-month period in the cost of those transformers.
Wow.
Now, that's not all inflation. Some of it's supply chain. Some of it's like what's happening on all these different, when you think supply chain, it's like, where is the copper coming from? Where is the core steel coming from? How's the manufacturing? What's going on with labor resources, logistics, trucking, fuel prices? All those things combined are creating these just extreme costs. So, I mean, you're talking a transformer would be $30,000 here. Now it's $90,000.
Wow.
Just 36 months later. I mean, that is just extreme. So those costs, we try to dampen that in the sense of a utility. The reason you don't see just prices doing this like you do at the gas pump is because all of our big infrastructure costs are capitalized, over a 30, 35-year period. So we try to soften that impact, but it catches up in time. If that goes too long, even if you can soften it, through that long-term investment and capitalizing, just like in your business, right? It starts catching up, and we're seeing that in the power supply side, but in the core operation of the utility, all those material costs at those significant increases, because you got conductor prices, they were moving at over 100% an increase in that same period. Insulators and poles, and poles went up 60%, and that's local. That's just coming. That's within a more localized region on those kind of things. So big cost increases.
Right.
So, but yeah, we got to catch those things, and we try to stay in front of it as much as we can. But those are the things that ultimately the board has to make a decision on. How are we covering costs? What's going on in that place? And we're not going to recover more than we need, but that's a little bit of a science in the process.
And I think that the gap many times is, the people that experience OTEC, is most of the time it's invisible. I mean, if it's not invisible, then their power's out and there's a problem, whatever the case.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like running the sound system at an event. Nobody knows anything's wrong until there's feedback or something
there's a
like
problem,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
And so, but I think that most people, they have no idea. They're not entrepreneurs. entrepreneurs. They're not business owners.
Right.
And they don't, there's a gap between their own personal finances and the way they operate in a business. You know, both Kyle had a tap house for a while, so he understands, you know, that business side. And so when people get the bill, whatever it might be, they're not really they're not really putting in their mind that it's like they generated that bill. They, whatever that might be, I mean, they have somebody that represents them, that made decisions on their behalf to keep the whole system afloat, and that might be reflected in what it is that they might be seeing.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of unique too, because it's a fluctuating bill, right?
Right.
Depending the time of year, depending what you're doing, you know, at the place, just like in the tap house, when you're running certain things, you're consuming X, and then when you're idling through, you know, depending what goes on, right?
Yeah.
It ebb and flows. So sometimes people are seeing their bill that has not changed at
Yeah.
all, but their consumption is changing, and so paying attention to that, I mean, you really got to see it. But we pay attention to it because we're sensitive to it, because that's our owners. We're really looking at now how that feels to the general public is a little bit different, because surprisingly enough, this is an interesting statistic. Surprisingly enough, you own this cooperative, and that's an amazing thing. But in our surveys, we only have we bounce in this high 58, 59, 60% that know that we're a cooperative.
Right.
Otherwise, they just see us as a utility, just as another utility,
Yeah,
right?
the power company.
Yeah, it's a big
right.
deal, right? Because you got 40% of the folks that we need to get to, and we need to help communicate better to. So appreciate, you know, so part of this opportunity, right, is to know that is an amazing thing, to have that ownership and what your capability is of engaging that, and what it means for a community if managed well, right? Which is part of my job, is trying to make sure that's done well.
Yeah.
But that's a big deal, and because that we need everybody to know that.
Right.
And we need everybody engaged, and because that's what makes us stronger as a community.
Well, and I've been communicating with your staff, and we've streamed several of your events, yearly meetings, and so on and so forth. And when I've heard your messages, it's like, I mean, it's one of the reasons that I wanted you here today. I mean, you are compelling, you tell the story really well, but it's a story that I don't know that I would know had I not been in that meeting and heard you and so on. And, you know, I mean, and so yeah, I mean, it's really good. And part of what we do for a living is, you know, tell the stories of our clients, take their language that they're speaking and try and turn that into the language that their customer is speaking, you know. And so, I mean, so I'm passionate about this. I mean, when I understood the story of OTEC and so on and so forth, for me, there was like, this is a cool thing. And part of our mission of EO Alive is telling the good stories of Eastern Oregon. And so it's like, man, how can I help them talk about this?
And I appreciate that, and you guys do a good job of it.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking on the we were offset here during the sports piece, but sports are exciting, and people are passionate about a team and about a player and about the environment, and just, you know, it's really fun stuff. I'd like to think our business is fun, but it's really not, right? For people on the outside, they don't get excited. They go, you know, and jump on our website and go, wow, that's really exciting stuff, right? And so it's a challenge to just capture the attention, especially in today's environment, right? With the media, where you got a 15-second spot where you might be able to hit somebody and get that they get that spark, right? But even if we're looking for that spark, it isn't that, you know, that amazing pitch, you know, or somebody, you know, running off on a home run, right? It's something that's more. It's more at a community level, and it's the foundation of what we do, and that's not as exciting, but it's so important. No. It's like, and in our world, that energy is kind of the foundation of everything that we do, and when that cost is out of line, or that isn't being provided as a great service. To your point, it's a real problem. And that's when people are going to pay attention. But that's the wrong time to be talking to folks, is when
Right.
they're out of power, or you got this massive rate increase, and now you're
Yeah,
backtracking.
we're sorry
to
your
say,
power's out. By the way,
Yeah.
you're a member.
and
that's
or here's
those-
a rate issue, right? And it's like you're trying to backpedal to,
Right.
to then communicate, how did we get here, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
to your point, and again, thanks for the opportunity. It's trying to be in front of that so they know what they're engaged in.
Right.
They know the challenges. They're part of that as a
Right.
community, and that's what's so powerful, is that us as a cooperative, Brent and Kyle, I mean, one of the things are philosophically, and this is difficult to do, but we were formed to deliver power to this community. So they got rid of this investor-owned utility, you bought them out, you took over control, all those employees and everything, that's all local, and all those dollars remain local, and they're not getting exported out, because it was CalPac, so California Pacific, so the dollars before were heading out, to California, anything that was going on in that margin. Now all that stuff is local, and the offices and all those things, so we're in those communities. But I think that having people kind of really connected to their ability to influence that and control that is paramount. And what we say is that's what we were formed to do, is to deliver power and do it effectively and efficiently as possible, and that we're only going to collect what we need to try to provide that service. But we have a lot of resources that can be helpful to our community at some certain periods of time that aren't doing that other work. Because we have to have trucks and equipment, and we've got accounting, and we got IT services, and we got lots of other things that are going on in our community that we can be helpful when we're not doing our core business. And the trick is to take, and so what we say is, we need all of our assets working on behalf of our member owners 24/7. If it's not doing this, let's put it to work over here, because our member owners, that's theirs. That's your trucks, it's your buildings, it's your equipment, it's your resources. Now we got to be smart about that, because we can't deteriorate our
Right.
core product while we're doing something
Right.
over here. It's like, pay attention to the ball. Don't get too distracted, but do this well, and then all the rest of these things. And that's where we try to use our resources, and we try to continue to expand those to help our communities, because it's theirs.
Yeah, like helping hang the wreaths or put the lights
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
the
If the
Christmas
city
tree.
needs help, their bucket, or they don't have a bucket, some of our smaller communities do not have some of those resources. Well, they do. That's us. That's just like a rural fire department.
That's awesome.
That's our stuff, and we just got to do a good job of that. And every day is just it's a little bit of a battle, but that's what we need to be doing.
You talk about energy not being exciting, but you guys do a pretty good job of like making the other stuff exciting, like the scholarships, just everything. You know what I mean? And that would be the avenue to you when you talk about you don't want to talk to somebody about that they're an owner when their power just shut off. But if you got a kid that's applying for a scholarship, that's a great opportunity to educate the family.
Yeah, well said. And that is in Offset. We got some of our comms folks here, and they're really good in this space. But it is knocking on that door. It takes a little bit to get people to open it, right? And I think you're right on. Those are some really fabulous things we can do because of great partners. Eastern Oregon University, we've done some really wonderful things with them as a partnership on our scholarships. We've got several where we're paying all tuition, for a 4-year, right?
Yeah.
And then we have those folks coming in as interns, and there's this community interaction that goes on where those kids are coming in and out of our system, and they're growing and learning, and what a great, for the cost of education these days, it's a lot. But we have tools in our toolbox to extend some of those things. So, back to those capital credits, there's a certain sector where people leave, and we go through a pretty thorough process to find them, and if they've left the system, and some capital credits become unclaimed. And so we use those dollars to help drive those scholarships and these things. So these are unclaimed that we can't find
Right.
the owner of them. They get
Right.
parked in different places, and we can use those for the benefit of our communities. And so that's a really it's a good connection, because other folks, sometimes people get twisted about, well, can you lower my rates rather than give these
Right.
scholarships, or can
Right,
you do
yeah.
X rather than do X, right? And so it's a balancing effect, but it's also, where do those funds come from? But I agree with you 100%. And boy, there's some fabulous kids across our territory
Oh,
that
yeah,
have done
for
some
sure.
wonderful things. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I want to reduce what you just said in a more plain fashion. Okay, so if you're an OTEC customer, maybe once a year or something, you get you get money back, and those are essentially dividends from the system. Okay,
Yeah.
and so then if somebody was a customer for OTEC and then they moved out of the area and they have not claimed those credits because they don't have an active account anymore, then those credits are accumulate, and that's the money that you're using to give away in scholarships.
Yeah, there's a fund there that
Okay.
is that we manage on that. That's boiled down, and the only little nuance of that to make sure that we're clear on is it's not just that they left; it's that we can't find them, because that doesn't go anywhere. So
Okay.
you could be gone from the system for 10 years and you live somewhere else, and as long as we can find you,
Right.
when the board allocates retirement of capital credits, that check's going to go to those folks.
Okay.
It's that when we get disconnected from them and we no longer can reach them, and they
Yeah.
don't maintain an address or something that we can find them back,
Okay.
that ultimately over a period of time, and it's pretty exhaustive, it winds up going over to unclaimed.
Okay.
And then we put it back to work for the community.
Kind of like what the state does with unclaimed funds.
Yeah, yeah.
Eventually, they spend that on something. It
Yeah.
doesn't sit there forever.
And this is going to stay, and it stays local, and that's what I really like about it. And we try to put it back into a place that helps our communities grow on the foundational level. So our youth and what's coming up, those are our leaders in the future, and I think it's one awesome investment.
The metaphor that keeps coming to my mind for what it is you do is Grand Round Hospital, because we spend a lot of time helping them tell their story, and the local control. I mean,
Yeah.
operationally they're
Really big.
different, but still there's a lot of similarities
Very much so.
between your two operations.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and the ability to grow your own, or the ability to, educate people that like Eastern Oregon, that want to stay in Eastern Oregon, and all of those things are super important. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
EOU is very similar too.
Yes.
So, no, this is great. So what do you? Reduce down to me. So what do you love about a co-op? You've said all these things, but what do you personally like? What do you love about being the CEO of a co-op, and specifically OTEC?
Well, I think for me, I was so when I discovered through that process we talked about, on the front end of this interview, was how I found the cooperatives. And even though I knew what a cooperative was, and you'd run into them in different places, until you really get into the underbelly of them and you really see how they function. And I will say that I'm not saying that every co-op does a great job. Right. That's people. It's still, we have to do a good job of using the instrument, the governance of a cooperative, and doing it well. That's why I talk about engagement from the membership. You got to be engaged, right? But when I discovered that piece, it was just amazing, because it's done right. It's a hybrid of, you still got to be great in business, which I love. I love the business side of just business, right? Mm-hmm. But co-ops have this hybrid ability when it's done right, where you're not for profit, but you got to still run a really great business, right? It's not an excuse. It's not like you think about. Some people think we're a monopoly, and it's like, you have no competitors. Well, we do, but we also have we have member owners that are super focused on, if you don't do it well, they should make some changes, right? And so you're constantly in that place, but we have amazing. I was just so amazed at the toolbox that the cooperatives have, and from back from the 30s and early 40s, when they were formed out of across rural America, when the investor owners said, hey, there's no money in serving rural America. From that point on, when they formed the cooperatives and started putting distribution power into the rural farms and ranches, they learned quickly that, hey, we could get together locally and form this little cooperative, and we'd build our distribution lines, and we'd bring power to these rural areas. And then they learned shortly after that, if we can do that, we're kind of being a little taken advantage of on our generation side and our transmission. I bet if we got together, we could form a co-op to build our own generation transmission.
To get better rates.
To get better rates if the market isn't doing us right.
Right.
And that's just the people saying, that's a little unfair. I think you need some competition, right? And so they actually, then we started forming generation and transmission cooperatives. And once they got a hold of that model, they learned that they could do that with anything. And that's why you as member owners, we as member owners, we own our banks. We own our software companies. We own marketing arms. We own our lobbying, legislative
That's
side.
the extension
We're
of the
self-insured.
co-op.
It's
Yeah.
massively, all the way up to we work internationally, in 45 countries and have served over 240 million people internationally in undeveloped countries. And that's all stuff you own.
Right.
And who would think that's
Interesting.
going on, right?
Right.
And the whole reason OTEC was able to be formed in the first place is because of those that kind of came before us and what they structured in this cooperative model. Not only did we have concerned citizens that said, I think there's a better way, but we are 100% financed by CFC, Cooperative Finance Cooperative out of Virginia, that is a co-op owned bank. And they financed 100% of that investment. And that story's been told quite a bit about 700 pennies, $7 investment to get
I don't know
30.
that story. And so sometimes,
No, so it's fabulous. But
Yeah.
that whole infrastructure, and that's what I love about it, is there's so much potential and power and capability that we have locally because we punch way above our weight.
Right.
We're this size, but
Right.
your cooperatives, there's 900 of them across the country. We're interconnected. We serve on boards, and we have that same governance that we have locally on all of these banks and software companies. I serve on a board out of Atlanta for our software company that runs it. That's where the headquarters is. But I'm on that board, so I have influence on that side of it that serves another 600 utilities. So that's the connection, and that's what we have. And you as local owners, you own all that, and you have
Yeah.
influence on that. So a lot of power. That's what I love about it, is we can do great things for our community with this toolbox if we
Yeah.
just know how to manage it.
Yeah. Well, and going back to my bill going up, I'm not really concerned about that, but I knew that if I asked that, it would help you explore and explain this thing. Yeah.
100%.
So-
Yeah.
So you guys recently did, not you, but you've done some mission trips. I mean, I don't know how, but they're compassion trips. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I think that involves your crew. I don't know, just kind of tell me that's
No,
great.
real quick. So we just had some crews. So Oregon sponsored some work being done in Guatemala,
Okay.
but that's through our international arm. So when I was mentioning that you own all these things, right?
Right.
So NRECA, National Rural Cooperative Association, that's our national arm, which they were formed for basically all of our benefits and all that side, but they're formed for the lobbying side and the legislative end to pay attention to rural America.
Okay.
And what things would be affecting, rural America by policy and through the federal government, and that to try to influence that on behalf of our rural citizens and those that we serve. So that's the focus point to go, hey, that's going to be really bad for our communities. And so we try to influence that, and that's one big piece of the puzzle for NRECA, right? Well, NRECA, because of the work done back in the 30s, they seen how well we developed the United States in undeveloped areas, and we're really good at it, right? And we serve now 42 million people across the nation as part of that network. And so in 1962, President Kennedy helped bring together a relationship with NRECA and formed NRECA, and we formed NRECA International, which is a not-for-profit arm that goes and works in undeveloped nations. And that's those 45 countries that we have worked in and that we've helped provide power. So on this bookend, we go and we help form cooperatives, and because we know how those are designed and built and how they can get that done. and here on this other bookend, we do this more localized surgical work where we're coming in into pockets of these nations that are undeveloped, where there's villages and places that do not have power.
Right.
And so then NRECA International works with the government of that country. Then they pare it down to the local government, and they determine some of these projects where there might be 30, 40, 50, 100 village homes that don't have power and they're isolated from the grid.
Right.
And we come in with a crew and we help deliver that power with basically our network capabilities. And this is the second time Oregon has sponsored a project through International where we've sent crews in to help do that work in conjunction with the locals on the ground and what happens. And so
What's
that's
the
how we go about
business
that.
side of that, the business sense side of that?
Like-
Because certainly those little, they're not going to be able to
Yeah.
pay enough rates to pay for that really expensive line. I mean,
Yeah,
just
so-
how's that paid for?
So which business side are you talking like
Well,
the
I've just-
like the value proposition of why we do it in the first place,
Right,
or
yeah.
how does that get
Well, and how does it get
managed?
paid for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple things. So
And
on-
we're not
Yep.
talking about our local business. We're talking about this.
yeah,
Yeah.
So one, because it is something we own upstream. It's a
Okay.
fabulous question, because it's like, well, what does that cost, and how do we go about those things, right? So the crews that participate. So I'm over on this bookend, right?
Okay.
Because I'm going to talk on both fronts. So this bookend, when we're sending crews, there's a really great investment process about how that works, and why I believe why I send some of our crews and what we do for that. But when you look at the financing of it, there's several things going on. Sometimes we're tapping into a cooperative that may have been formed, that
Okay.
we've helped form. Okay, that's just the structurally about what goes on. Other times it's a municipality that's existing there, and there's a relationship that says, like in Guatemala, that municipality, they have special rates for the rural areas that they tap into, and after we get done building those lines, they take over that lines and service that and provide those rate structures, and they continue to maintain it. Part of the upstream NREC International is to make sure that is sustainable. That isn't a drop in the hat and they tear it out and
Right,
sell it
right,
for
right,
scrap and
yeah.
move on, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that go on before we ever arrive on the power of that. But there's other, including the U.S. interest, and there's other entities around the globe that help finance this work because of the interrelationships with governments, and for multiple reasons. But stability is a big one.
Got it.
Stability is a big one. You can have a military park somewhere in order to protect people and assets. It's better to have a strong economic position there where they're healthy and it's a healthy communities, and that they don't have terrorism injecting
Right.
themselves in, all the instability that can happen in undeveloped nations, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So you have all that business end of the stick here, and then I like to say so you have that in multiple interests of why people do what they do. And then I think the humanitarian side is kind of the wind in the sails that pushes the ship.
It's a
Everybody gets
combination
around
of
that.
Diplomacy and humanitarian.
Absolutely. And
sure.
when you think about it, I mean, there's almost 1 billion people still in the world without power. There's 4 billion in what we call energy poverty. And so everything we're operating here, I mean, this would run the whole community.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
just the energy in this building, right? But in those communities, that's energy poverty. They can't plug in certain things. They're just the capacity isn't there. But having something is better than nothing, and where they start, right? And how that works. And so when you think about the investment side of it, for the U.S. and anything else, there's a massive. It's like, say, humanitarian side, everybody gets around that, and that's just a great thing to do. But how do you do it from a business end?
Right, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And when you think about, how much money do you think is involved in the United States in utility infrastructure?
Right.
So who provides all that? We've been doing that work for years and years and years in oil and gas development in foreign nations. That's our technology. It's our intellectual property. When they go in with transformers and poles, all that stuff, where is it manufactured? Who's coming from where? The globe benefits from that, and depending where you're at and where you're from. So there's a pretty complex system around ensuring what gets done. Last thing I'll say on it, Brent, is and this is more localized to just how I look at this particular piece and the value for our linemen that go and what happens in that. And I think it would be shared across the country when other folks look at this proposition and opportunity for a lineman to go do that work.
Right.
But when you send them over to do that, I liken it to, we take our managers and supervisors, we send them off to all kinds of training and to
Right.
develop them, to lead and to grow in what they do. Well, in the trades, this is a very similar thing. If you have a lineman and he's worked in LeGrand, and we've got really great crews that have got lots of experience, but if you you can get, that particular trade can sometimes get pigeonholed into a place, and this is all they do, and this is all they experience, and they
Right.
kind of grow up in the trade, and that's what they have, right? And they're good folks, right? But for all of us, experience matters, right? And so when they go into a foreign country like this, they're going right back to the foundation of their trade, in the sense there isn't bucket trucks we can put on these extreme mountainous areas, and what we were in this last trip.
Right.
Significant heat. They're digging all those holes by hand. That the part of the locals are doing that part of most of that work, and then we're coming in with stringing lines and what we're doing. But it's really to the fundamental of their trade. Language barriers of what they're learning. There's no regulatory environment around them, so safety is super important. Kids and the folks in those villages, they've not been around power,
Wow.
so safety side, they are learning a ton, and they are growing, as we all would, with that experience, and then they come back and they get to bring that home. No different than a supervisor or manager trying to come back with what they've learned and trying to share with their organization.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing investment, and those guys, I just think it's a great investment, as it is when we send them off for mutual aid when they go work a hurricane,
Yeah,
or they work
yeah.
a fire on the coast, to try and help another utility stand up. So that's the business end of the stick on
Right.
several fronts. So didn't mean to drag that out
No,
so long.
The
no.
benefit of it
the
too for
basis.
the employee is that can change their life.
Completely.
Like their whole outlook on everything
Yes.
can change after a trip
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, the economic status of those folks, and I mean they are good people, happy people, but very meager from our vantage point
Yeah.
of what they have. But power is, in my opinion, it's the foundation of energy. Is such a wonderful. That's a gift. That's really a hand up, because instead of, you can put as much money as you want into meals and other things that is good and helpful, but then you got to get the next meal. But with
Right.
energy, you are putting a foundation in that helps them fish for a lifetime.
Okay, good. I have one more question, because I just want you to hit this because it's so important.
Yes, sir.
Help us understand the amount of kilowatt per the money that we pay for energy compared to, because I've seen that map a couple
Yeah.
of times, and when
Yeah.
when you see the amount that we pay or versus somebody in the East pays, I mean, people do not understand that benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and real quick, and I know time-wise, thanks for asking that. We do have some of the lowest rates in the country, and that's the map you're kind of referring
Right,
to,
yeah.
Brent, because we've tried to kind of show that. But if you're when things are tough economically, I don't care what our rates are. That's hard for
Right.
people. It doesn't matter how low we can get those rates. It's always going to be a challenge for paying your bills on those things. So we recognize that. We really recognize that. But we do have some things we got to pay close attention to. And there's you've heard a lot on the dams and what they call breaching of some of the lower Snake River dams and some of those assets in our hydropower. Not taken away from where challenges come from, why some people are behind that, whether it be in protecting certain fish and what goes on, and there's a lot of money spent in doing that. I think there's a lot of attention there. So but no matter where you set on that spectrum, right now those dams are the reason. They're a big reason why the Pacific Northwest rates are where they are currently, because that hydropower. There's not a fuel component cost.
Right.
There's a production end of it, right? But there's no fuel cost going
Yeah.
into it. That's the hydro. That's the water. So if you have a gas plant, you're paying for the gas. Coal,
Yeah.
you're paying for right? So that's that fuel cost not there. And so we have really competitive, and that's half of our costs, as I mentioned. So we have really competitive rates there on that side. And
Give me a number so I understand.
Yes.
Versus somewhere else.
Yeah. So if you're talking in our particular rates, we're like California is probably as an average probably running around 22 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you look at our residential rate, we're going to be in the 7 cents. You know. And then when you
A third.
yeah it's a third, and then we use kind of an all-in rate. So you have a facility charge, and then you have your energy charge, right? And it's that facility charge. A lot of people have trying to understand that piece. So if you didn't use any energy and you were just gone for the whole month, we're going to still bill you in this $38 in our new
'cause-
rate structure as a basis of,
Right.
of that piece of. And you're going to get that no matter what, and that's really because we still inspect the lines. We still make sure
Yeah.
if you had your neighbor drop in and flip the light switch, it's going to still come on because we have power available and ready to serve at any given time. And so that's why that's there. That's to cover no matter what happens. And keep in mind we're at cost, so that's just what those costs are, and we're charging where we think that number actually is. And then just the energy cost, we try to protect that and not put recovery costs in there, because we could make that other rate really low. We could go, oh, let's just charge $8. Well, then we're subsidizing in a different way, right?
Right.
And then we'd pick it up in the energy side. And then what happens in really cold snaps in some of our more economically challenged areas, they don't necessarily have the best insulated homes and some of the energy efficiencies that cost a fair amount of money. And so then they're going to use more energy, and if we put it into that energy charge rather than that base charge, we're going to be over collecting from them. It's better to keep that energy charge as low as we possibly can, make sure we're recovering right here in this facility charge. And that's a really important nuance that's hard if people aren't in the utility business
Right.
of why that is the way it is. But yeah, super difference across the country, some of the lowest rates, but we owe a lot to that, to the hydropower, and then just being locally owned and not for profit. That's the big driver of those.
So what's
rate
on the other
structures.
end? How many cents per
Kil-
kilowatt minute? Is that what it?
kilowatt hour? So
Yeah.
it'd be like if you had.
Who's on the extreme? What states are on the extreme end?
Oh,
of that?
probably Hawaii, California, Alaska, and for different reasons.
Yeah.
Some are energy policy, some are isolation. So in Hawaii, it's like you're isolated on an island, so they have a lot of production. They have to generate right there.
Yeah.
Right. Same with Alaska. They got all these isolated areas. They're running generation sources. They don't get the benefit of economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
Transmission systems very difficult, and the permafrost and how they got to connect the world
Yeah.
up in Alaska. So you get these extreme cases. Get over to the East Coast, you're getting a lot of that. But much of it is, there's a lot to do with energy policy, depending on the states what you're in. There's a lot to do with energy source. Just like we opened the conversation with where coal was at or gas in Wyoming, and if you're setting on the energy source, the ability to move it from there to the power plant
Right.
is cheaper. And so sometimes your rates are much better because you're not having that transport and logistics.
Yeah. Well, Les, thank you.
Thank you,
Anything
Jack, for the
else
time.
before we quit? Anything else you want to mention?
Appreciate the opportunity, and we've got lots of we're reaching out with we're trying to come to our membership a little bit more with meetings and services, and so we're trying to get around to all of our communities and having a little different ways to try to communicate to that point. Is sometimes we're not the most exciting business, so we're trying to meet people where they are in different avenues. So Power Eastern Oregon, some of those things we've been trying to stand up for the business focus of things and those areas. So more to come on that. We'll try to stay in front of the folks and communicate best we can. But
Yeah.
we're always open to ideas, so you guys let us know.
Well, thank you, and we'd love to have you come back again. And we could talk a long time. I know. so,
100%. Brent,
yeah.
Kyle, thank you guys for
Yeah.
your time.
Thank you.
All right, you want to get us out of here?
Yeah, let's do it. On this day, April 17th, 1610, English explorer Henry Hudson departs London, England aboard the Discovery on his fourth and final voyage, which he died on, to discover the Northwest Passage to the Pacific. Here's a really crazy thing. 1961, how much concrete do you think they needed to construct just the foundation of the Space Needle?
I don't know. 61 was a really good year, though.
5,850 tons of concrete just for the foundation of the Space Needle.
61 was still a really
Yeah,
good year.
it began in
The year I was
1961. 1969, Sirhan Sirhan is convicted of assassinating U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. 1993 was a bad day. This day was a bad day. This is
93?
the start of the Rodney King riots.
Okay.
On this day in
What a
1993.
mess that was.
2023, new research shows that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch now has coast creatures living in it, breeding in it, including jellyfish, sponges, and worms, raising concerns about invasive species more than anything. But the crazy thing about this garbage patch is located in between California and Hawaii in the Pacific Ocean, and it is estimated to cover 1.6 million square kilometers, which is twice the size of Texas, contains 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic. Isn't that crazy? Underwater, in between us and Hawaii. That's wild. That is so wild. The number one movie in America on this day in 1995, Bad Boys with Will Smith, Martin Lawrence. And the quote of the day comes from John Sinclair. Failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. One more time. Failure is a bruise, not a tattoo.
Yeah, isn't that true? All righty. Hey, thank you, Les.
Yeah,
Really,
appreciate it.
appreciate
Thank you guys
yeah.
so much.
Yep.
All right. And we'll see you guys soon.